Thursday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Browns on the bye. Have the week off to get things changed around and reorganized. Browns enter their bye week 2-7, tied with a number of teams for the worst record in football. GM Andrew Berry met with the media, talked about the feeling inside the building in Berea.
Enter the bye week at 2-7, and it's obviously a disappointment. And we haven't played well enough. We haven't done the things that are needed to achieve consistent results and consistent wins throughout the season. It's disappointing for us internally, disappointing for our fans, and really all of us share in the record. It's not just our players and coaches; it's myself, it's our personnel staff, it's our research group. And our focus really this week is on doing the things that are within our control to play quality football through the last 8 weeks of the regular season, because we have not done that to date.
With that, let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, and the Barking Browns podcast. Casey, 2-7's bad. When you consider the expectation was you're going to contend in the AFC, it makes it like a colossal disappointment.
Yeah, and if you think about the disappointing seasons in years past, you'd have a decent year like 2018, and then 2019, you just come crashing back down. Even then, I think you won 6 games. Then, you look at 2020 and then 2021, these ebb and flows. And that's the thing that you want to see the most is just give me back-to-back, stack 2 years of being a very good football team that makes the playoffs and is relevant, and just their inability to do that in back-to-back years. It makes it feel like you want to feel like you're building something, but when you look around the league, the teams that truly build something, it gets to a level and it kind of stays at that level, and the Browns have had an inability to do that.
Yeah, and I said all along when Berry and Stefanski were extended, now their job is to be consistent playoff teams. Yep. And a huge fail in year one after the extension without question. I don't have any way to explain this. This will show you how bad it's been this year. The Browns are the only team in the NFL with more punt yards. So they have more punt yards than total offensive yards this season. Corey Bojorquez is outperforming the Browns offense with 2,600 punt yards. The Browns offense has 2,470 yards. Now, Bojorquez is really good, but that offense is just really bad.
Yeah, I love Corey Bojorquez. He's a weapon. You can't have this. This isn't a thing that you can have happen. Your punter cannot outperform your offense, and that just shows you the gross ineptitude that this offense has been throughout the season. That's inexcusable right there, and he's done that because he's had to, because he's had more whacks at the ball than any other punter in the league. But I'd have to do more research in this. How common is this? Does this happen every year in the NFL to one team, or is this something that happens once a decade? I don't know that yet, but I am going to get to the bottom of it.
All right, as you might guess, plenty of voicemails. So let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I heard you guys talking and saying the Browns got to get the quarterback right, and that's all it is. Well, is it the quarterback or is it our scheme? Everybody will turn around and say Stefanski's this big quarterback guru. Well, what's to say the quarterback ain't never going to be any good under him? Yeah, he's done what he does with 5 guys, but again, you look back at last year, we won 5 games, we got lucky. And then look at the playoff game, we got totally demolished. If I was Haslam, I don't know why he didn't wait this year, see what these 2 idiots do, and then get rid of them. But no, he turns around and gives them 5-year extension. I mean, you got to look at everything. I still think with him as coach, we're not going anywhere. We'll never get a quarterback. My opinion. Thanks, guys.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. They changed the scheme. And so is it the quarterback? Yep. Is it the scheme? Yep. And the thing that I can't explain and nobody's been able to explain to me, you have basically the same offensive line, and they can't block anymore. They can't move people off the line of scrimmage. To me, that screams scheme. It was also the quarterback. The quarterback play has been bad. It's been really bad.
Yeah, you'd like to be able to separate those two things, but they're married together because you changed your scheme to fit a quarterback. Then that quarterback couldn't even run that scheme. So it becomes this ugly cycle. It goes back and forth. And what's interesting to me is since you switched off play calling duties from Stefanski to Dorsey, just by switching it into quarterback, this still looks a lot more like a Stefanski offense than it ever did with Deshaun Watson. And that was my biggest issue for wanting to replace Watson is I could not even evaluate what I was watching because you had a quarterback who couldn't see the field, make his reads, or pull the trigger. So just by implementing a guy who will at least do those three things, you kind of get a sense for what this scheme is and what it isn't. So it didn't even look similar with Watson. It was so disjointed and broken. So now we can actually start to evaluate that over these 8 games. And that, to me, that's what this is these 8 games is you need to decide your offensive direction in 2025. And I wouldn't have handed play calling duties to Dorsey at that point in time just because I don't like changing a bunch of variables at once. But now understand this. Dorsey is being evaluated. The spotlight is on him now, and they're going to decide whether they want to move forward with him and this scheme going forward. So it's going to be on his lap to get this thing to go now.
Yeah, I've seen enough. I give me the Kevin Stefanski scheme, and let's assuming that he's still there, and that might be an incorrect assumption, but assuming it's still Kevin Stefanski, let's go back to the old under center play action. We know what we can get out of that. I can't for the life of me explain why the offensive line. It's got to be more than Bill Callahan's gone. I understand he's a great offensive line coach, but you went from top 5 to bottom 5 because your coach left. That can't happen. There's got to be something more to it than that. Has to be.
Yeah, the offensive line's a weird one too because I think it's a lot of things. The scheme is definitely chief among those. I think they undervalued how quick this group would age out. Obviously, they misevaluated the injury situation, and there's been a regression from one player that doesn't get talked about enough, in Ethan Pocic. It's like I don't even know who that player is now. And now is that Callahan? That very well could be. He was getting that much out of Ethan Pocic to the point now where I don't even recognize the player. So a lot of factors, but yes, the scheme is chief among those factors.
Along those lines, Pro Football Network NFL offensive line rankings entering Week 10 this week in the NFL. Lions 1, Chiefs 2, Eagles 3. Browns used to be in that little corridor there. Now they're down at 25. The seams are showing along the Browns' offensive line. Bill Callahan left this offseason, depriving the Browns of one of the game's top offensive line coaches. Jameis Winston under center for the Browns instead of Deshaun Watson. Cleveland's front 5 could rebound over the back half of the season. Yeah, but again, it just looks different. If you go back and you watch, they're not moving anybody off the line of scrimmage. And they used to do that. It used to be 2-3 yards they were moving them off the line of scrimmage.
I'm in the process right now of actually writing up an areas they need to evaluate over the final 8 games, and the offensive line is, for me, it's paramount. Because if you look at the reason this team's been at least consistent since 2020 is they've won on both sides of the line of scrimmage in the trenches. They've lost that ability in the offensive line. Like you said, there's no push, there's no physicality. And part of that is scheme because in Stefanski's system, everything looks the same. So defensive linemen don't just tee off. They don't know. They're trying to read the play out, So when it's more definitive what's going on, these guys are losing their one-on-one matchups. And we're starting to move players around. I really like the fact that they're going to get DeWanda a long, extensive look at left tackle. Because if you can knock that off your wish list, that is a huge burden that you have over you right now that you almost get forced when you go into a draft if you need a left tackle we got to get this position. 1 or 2 rounds you have to. Now, they may still have to, but they also have to think about guard. They got guys that are aging out. They need a center next year. They have to retool this offensive line, and they have to decide over these final 8 games which guys are going to be here in 2025. And for me, like you said, man, to be in that top 8 to top 5 for 4 straight seasons, you kind of get used to that. And then when that's taken from you, you can just see how it hampers your team and your inability to stay ahead of the sticks and protect quarterbacks on third downs. The article, though, they're correct. Just Winston being on the field, at least the ball is going to come out on time. They're going to know where he's at in the pocket, so it'll start to look more like a traditional drop back quarterback, getting rid of the ball and timing offense than have to hold your block, and then the pocket moves on you without you knowing, and then your guy's out of position, you get called for a hold. There's just a lot more variables when you have an erratic running quarterback. Not even running in the sense of running for first downs, just scrambling all the time and moving the pocket on you. So at least this offensive line will be able to get in sort of a groove. Hopefully these five can stay healthy enough to build some cohesion so you can see what actually works.
All right, so this from The Athletic, mid-season predictions for every NFL team. For the Browns, they say they shake up the front office and move on from either their GM or their chief strategy officer or both. That would be Andrew Berry, the GM. Chief Strategy Officer is Paul DePodesta. A lot can happen in the next 2 months, but if the most expensive roster in the NFL, in NFL history, produces 3 or 4 wins, it's hard to see the Haslams allowing the front office group to make crucial decisions going forward. That's 100% accurate.
Yeah.
Absolutely 100% accurate.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that last sentence, right? Like you can feel one way how you feel about Barry, either as a strategist when it comes to contracts or talent evaluation, those kind of things. But when you put in brass tacks, the most expensive roster in NFL history, and you're literally 2-7, like that's unacceptable. But when this whole offseason, you talked about it, we thought those two, Stefanski and Barry, had kind of solidified their position that they could weather a bad season from Watson and kind of outlast just that one bad thing that they did, that one move that's hanging over them. They could outlast that. But it's been a lot of different things. I wish it was just Watson and that was it. There's been a lot of negativity, just inadequate planning, just misevaluation of injuries, lack of depth in certain areas where you definitely had to have it and just for whatever reason ignored it. So those are fireable offenses. Like I can't defend that. I still feel like that they'll probably still be here. But DePodesta did not sign an extension when Stefanski and Barry did. He's the one, but he's also the one guy we really don't know exactly what he does, but he's also someone who's never on the premises. He showed up for the Bengals game. He was in Cleveland for that game. He could have been here for other games, but we didn't see him. But we saw him on the sidelines for that game. So there were definitely discussions being had. We'll see if he outlasts this. But even if he's not there, because we don't know what he does, what difference does that truly make? It'd be interesting to see if it changes draft strategy and stuff, because there's certain things that they do that I vehemently agree with. I like their guardrails. I like the fact that you're looking at players like Myles Garrett and David Njoku who are looking at getting towards their third contract and they're only 29 years old. That's because of the guardrails. So there's some of these things that are in place that I agree with, but obviously you can't argue with the results on the field, and this year has been catastrophic.
Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. Now I can step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s, $10 each. 10 times multipliers, 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I don't know if we need to make any coaching changes. Not sure about the GM. We just need to maybe take a look at changing our strategy and getting football minds involved in our drafting process and player evaluation process and get away from this analytics and the old Moneyball approach. It doesn't seem to really work in football. Unfortunately, we really screwed ourselves because of the Deshaun Watson deal, and that's on Haslam. And we need to kind of figure things out to become good again. We were good last year. So quit making mistakes, quit knuckling down, doubling down on this stupid Deshaun Watson deal. Jameis Winston's never going to be any good, and DTR is just kind of a bust, unfortunately.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Casey, DTR is a 5th-round pick. He's a guy that I think can develop into a backup. He's not going to be a starter. He's not going to be a really successful starter in the NFL. I'd be shocked. The analytics, yeah. Here's the other thing. The Deshaun Watson trade was bad. What made the Deshaun Watson trade catastrophic is $230 million guaranteed. That's what makes it the albatross that you're going to have to deal with the next 2 years because of cap issues.
Yeah, and that's the thing that floats over this entire team. That's the kind of the thing that weighs on you, and they definitely, like in hindsight, do you think they make that deal knowing what they knew even 1 year into it? Not as bad as it's gotten, there's no way, but like it's definitely been regrettable. I would push back with a few things the caller said. And I know the word analytics, especially when you're losing, is going to get a bad rep, and people are going to be sick of hearing about it, and it's going to be like, get these nerds out of my game. But like, if you just sub out that word, if I were going to ask you to make a decision, wouldn't you want to have all the available information possible to make the best decision you could make? If I told you like, no, I'm going to make you make a decision, but I'm only going to tell you half the information. Over time you're going to make worse decisions. So I don't get mad at them for doing that. And there's different ways to do it. And we definitely see Detroit right now, and they're definitely deemed the football guys, and they're having a lot of success. So that grass is pretty green over there, and I get it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, man, I'm not going to be mad at trying to have as much information as possible to make the best decisions. That being said, we're talking about this Deshaun Watson thing. It turned out to be a terrible decision, not even a bad decision, maybe the worst decision in franchise history. I don't think and that was with all the information possible. So if the ends don't justify the means, I could see getting away from it. At the end of the day, that's probably why they would pivot away from DePodesta.
Well, DePodesta is kind of like the Wizard of Oz. He's behind the curtain, and nobody knows what does he do? What is he doing behind the curtain? That's why people are blaming analytics, because the Browns will tell you everything's collaborative, so you can't point to one person, and everything's multiple, so you don't do one thing really well. Those are the two things I've come to learn. Collaborative means we're not going to tell you who's to blame. Multiple means we don't do anything well enough to be known for that.
Yeah, it's frustrating, isn't it, when you can't? But everybody wants it. I get the idea. You want to be like, that's the problem. Get it out of here. Well, this franchise, this organization is not going to give you that. They're not going to be like, yep, it was this guy's decision. It's the reason you can't listen to anything they say and just follow their actions. Whoever they tab at the end of this season to be the scapegoat will be who at least they want you to perceive as the problem.
And if they don't do anybody, it means it was the owner's decision probably that he was driving the train, because the owner has never fired himself and never will. Nope. All right, Andrew Berry talked about Deshaun Watson being the Browns quarterback moving forward.
Our focus with Deshaun, I would say for any player with a season-ending injury and a major injury, is first and foremost with the recovery, and to make sure that he gets healthy from the Achilles injury. Everything else we'll deal with at a later moment.
How do you assess how he played though before he got hurt?
Yeah, I would say, more broadly, Tom, we didn't play well. We haven't played well as a team, and we haven't played well as a unit on offense. And I think oftentimes when you don't play well on offense, obviously your starting quarterback and your play caller will get the most criticism. But the reality of it is offense it comes down to organization and synchronization. And there's just a lot of shared ownership across the different position groups in terms of why we didn't perform.
So the thing is, Andrew Berry isn't going to say we're moving on from Deshaun Watson until you tell him what's available to move on to.
Yeah, and I know some people want him to say things premature, but the guy's still under contract, still on the roster, so he's not going to be like, he's not the answer, we're moving on. Even though you find out we're hearing these same things in 2021 about Baker, how they were supporting him in public, but then you find out they were doing work in November on Deshaun Watson of that same season. They're already looking at their contingency plan. But I'll say this, that he was the most non-committal I've heard him be about Deshaun Watson in this entire process. If you rewind, and it had been last year after he had his shoulder injury and surgery, they were saying, when Deshaun is healthy, he is our starter. They're not saying that now. They're saying, we'll deal with that when he's healthy. We'll deal with that when he's healthy. They're just pushing that on down the road. But those guys, like, you feel how you want to feel about them. They're not dumb. They see the same things we see. I think they understand clearly he is not going to be the guy that they need him to be. And they have to move from him. Problem is, because of the contract, he's going to be associated with them. So they can't just, like, vocally, especially during the season be like, yeah, he's not going to be our starter next year. They're never going to say that. Follow their actions. That'll let you know exactly where they feel like they are with him.
All right, so this from Pro Football Network, NFL offensive rankings entering Week 10. Ravens are 1, Commanders are 2, the Buccaneers are 3. Remember, they don't have Godwin or Mike Evans for a long stretch of time. More interesting, Giants are 30th, the Patriots are 31st, and the Browns are dead last. Grade F. It's a shame the American grading system can't go lower than F. The Browns are in a tier unto themselves when it comes to their grading this season. Watson is fun to watch. He's far from stabilizing force that the offense currently ranks dead last in yards per play, EPA, and points per drive. Anybody who has watched the Browns can't argue with that ranking.
I'm shocked that the Toronto Argonauts were not ranked ahead of them in this list. Yeah, it's maddening. It's as bad as it sounds. 32 of 32. And there are teams with starting rookie quarterbacks with first-year coordinators sitting in front of you. That is pretty damning stuff. I'm choosing to parse this apart. I'm going to consider what Watson did as one season, and I'm evaluating the second season. And I expect that number to climb, not too high, but I think over the course of the last 8 games, I think you start to see them move up and be around that 20 points per game and be more explosive and more big plays. But you can't ignore the fact that this has just been inept. We talked about it earlier. Your punter has more yards than your entire offense. It's maddening. And I get the fans' frustrations, and it's, as an analyst, it's hard to watch them. It's hard to watch this offense play and then have to write a stock up, stock down report on Monday. It's all of them stock down. Like it's hard to be positive, but when you really pull it apart, which is what we're doing now during the bye, it's time for self-scout and look. And there are little bright spots sprinkled out through here, but just the overall play's been so bad, it's hard to feel great about it.
Yeah, and you mentioned your stock up, stock down. You did Corey Bojorquez, obviously stock up. He has more yards than the offense. Cedric Tillman, who's played well, stock down, third down pass defense, and Jameis Winston. Yeah, I mean, you win first and second down, and you blow coverage in 2 instances that led to 2 touchdowns when the game was still very much within reach.
Yeah, and you have momentum in those. Like you're looking at like a 3rd and 21 after a huge Myles Garrett sack, and you're really about to seize momentum and get them off the field, and then just wide open as you can be, Josh Palmer all by himself. And when you go back and look at the tape, it's like, okay, I wish I could just once again blame one person. Multiple people you can blame. On the first play, I'm blaming Juan Thornhill, and then the second blown coverage with Quentin Johnston. That's on Denzel. Like that's frustrating because we're talking about week 9. We're talking about veteran players. These aren't rookies. We're talking about the second year of a defensive system, and you're still having communication errors. And at the most crucial of times, third down, that's money down. That's when guys get paid in this league, is to be money on that down. And this defense played great on first and second down. Then you get to third down, and Justin Herbert was 5 of 8 for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns on third downs in the first half of that game. And that's all they needed. That's the difference in the football game. So I expect more of this defense. Like we're sitting here talking about offense and how down we are on everything, and they've been putrid. I had very high expectations for this defense, and they play good in spurts, but they do not consistently carry that throughout a game. If they did, you'd be in way more games. Like even that Chargers game, you couldn't score points, but if you just do your job on third down, they don't score either. And you're in that kind of a dogfight. But when you give up stuff like that on third down, it's just free money to a player like Justin Herbert. He's going to take that every single time.
Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from from the Orange and Brown Report. Almost got your old place there, Casey. The All Eyes on Cleveland podcast and the Barking Browns podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
A lot of people are talking about how the Cleveland Browns need to draft a quarterback early, talking about maybe Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. But I think they should go best player available, most likely a left tackle or maybe an edge. Who knows, with like Denzel Ward's stop and starter play, maybe a corner. But I think with the extra third-round pick, we could use that pick to possibly move back into the first round to take a quarterback like Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers, because I think they're a little bit more geared towards what Kevin Stefanski wants to do, because both of them play under center for a decent amount of time. And I think that'll be good for the Browns if they can make that happen. But hopefully we can get a win after the bye week. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Casey, I don't want him to force. You can't force a quarterback, especially, it doesn't seem like there's going to be the definitive number one overall pick, Joe Burrow type or Andrew Luck type or that quarterback. And if you don't really like a quarterback, you have so many. I'd like a wide receiver. I'd like, get me somebody that threatens the defense. Get me a left tackle. Sure, I'll take a left tackle. But if you don't have the top overall pick and you aren't 100% certain, this guy's going to be Joe Burrow, find somebody that's going to be a stud for 10 years.
Yeah, the trading back into the first round to get a quarterback at the end of the first has only worked out for a few teams. Now, we have Lamar in our division, so we see that one. People often don't remember that wasn't their first-round pick. They took a tight end, Hayden Hurst, and then traded back up and got Lamar. And obviously that worked out. But most of the time, when you get one of those tweener quarterbacks that have fell out of favor of being a guy, and now they're, probably honestly a top of day 2 talent, but you force them into the first, his quarterback gets moved up just because of the scarcity. You put yourself in a weird position because then he's a first-round quarterback. There's pressure to play him right away. And if they're not ready, you could ruin them. So I agree with you. If you don't absolutely love one of these quarterbacks, you have enough needs that you don't have to force that. And this is also a front office. Will I be surprised if they trade back out of the first round to accumulate more first rounds to try to go up and get their guy whenever it becomes available and have multiple first to give themselves a better opportunity? I wouldn't discount that. But if you could give me T-Mac from Arizona out wide, I'll gladly take that. I wouldn't be surprised if they get in that 8 to 12 range of drafting if they win a few games, using one of those picks on something that's not going to make a lot of people happy, but get the best interior offensive lineman on the board. Like, you got to solidify yourself in several areas, and I'm not going to be mad if you draft someone that's not really considered a sexy pick because you do have enough needs. Oh yeah, and they're most of them are on the offensive side of the ball right now. That offense, we just told you how bad it was. Again. The other thing is, you gotta find somebody. Go find somebody right now who evaluates quarterbacks in college, because you've done a horrible job as an organization, horrible evaluating quarterbacks. So you better start looking at that, because you need to find somebody that can evaluate quarterbacks. And this particular regime has no practice at it. They've only gotten a fifth rounder out of UCLA and DTR. So they don't even have practice at it themselves, because this particular regime hasn't taken that swing. So and they say they do work. I did like something that Barry said in his presser, is that they treat themselves like an expansion team, as if they need every single thing and they have to evaluate every single position. I think that is the correct approach, but they have no practice at it to understand if their process even works. And quarterback's the most definitive one, the one that it's going to have the most spotlight on it. So if you're wrong there, it shines brighter than in most areas. But I agree with you. Like, I kick over every rock, talk to every talent evaluator, every quarterback coach, anyone that you can that has an eye on the college game and what transfers from the college game now from college to the pros, because that's the other thing we don't talk about. Like, a lot of these kids are able to go back to school now because of the NIL, which I think suits them, because colleges aren't in the business of really preparing quarterbacks for the NFL. College coaches don't worry about that. College coaches are trying to keep their jobs. They're not worried about making sure this guy sees all these third down looks and empty and is able to check and do can calls and get under center. Like, that's not the thing. So you have to be really tight on your evaluation to understand what translates from today's college game to the actual NFL.
Yeah, and you know, where my mind comes up with that from, if you go and you look how the 49ers came upon Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft, they hired Brian Griese as their quarterback coach. They told him, go find us a quarterback you think can play. He had called games of Brock Purdy, went and studied Purdy, and said, I think this guy can be a decent NFL quarterback. So, again, they're out there. Just go find one of them, because whatever you've been doing hasn't worked since '99. No. Whatever you have done, do not do that. It's not working.
Amen. Kick over every rock, talk to everyone you can talk to, but do not do what you've been doing. Don't pick at 22 either. If you get the 22nd pick in the draft, run from it.
All right. I don't think we got to worry about that. We're so far away from getting up to 22. So let me ask you this before we go to break. I've told you I would scrap this offense. I've seen enough of it. It's disjointed. It isn't working. Would you scrap it and go back to here's the thing. Kevin Stefanski knows how to fix the problems in the offense he runs. He doesn't know how to fix the problems in this offense because there's so many of them. Would you allow, if you stay with Stefanski, would you allow him to go back to the offensive system that he's run before this year?
Without wasting a second, yes, I would definitely do that. But that's kind of the mentality I was taking last year when they were looking at all these offensive coordinators, and I was looking at Clint Kubiak out in San Francisco, and to me that's a no-brainer because he already speaks your language. He knows your system. He's been exposed to Shanahan's version of it. And just to have all those things, and that way you're on the same page and you just hit the ground running. You don't have to install a whole new thing and then learn on top of everything. You already have a base knowledge that you guys kind of share because you always need to add wrinkles. I think that one talked about aspect of the NFL is defensive coordinators spend a concerted effort into going at the Shanahan style offenses, and they've had less success this year. So you always have to put new wrinkles in. So you still need to bring someone in to be your offensive coordinator. I just need them to have a better understanding of what Stefanski does so you can build out from that, not trying to build from scratch.
Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take another timeout, other side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, and the Barking Browns podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hello, this is Jay from Parma. I just want to say the Browns do have an identity. They're a good football team when they have a pocket-passing quarterback. You got 4 quarterbacks, and I want to go to the 4th one, Bailey Zapp. This guy played 14 games from New England, won 10. He's a pocket-passing quarterback who can also run. And I'm wondering what Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns can do with this guy to make him even better. That brings me to Kevin Stefanski. Why don't we give Kevin Stefanski unrestricted control over the Browns for the next 8 games? Have a good one.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Casey, I don't think the Browns have an identity. They can't throw from the pocket. They're 32nd in the NFL in offense. Bailey Zappi, I think he's just a placeholder for him. I don't mean to be that guy relative to an NFL quarterback. You know, it takes a lot to be an NFL quarterback, but I'm not anxious to see Bailey Zappi playing quarterback for the Browns. I'm just not.
Yeah, sometimes I have nightmares when he carved us up when he played for the Patriots. And I get why fans might feel like that, but if we get to the point where we're playing Zappi, things have went even worse than they're going now, which is hard to fathom for me. The way I look at the quarterback position right now is I'm playing Jameis Winston for at least the next 4 games, just so I can evaluate my wide receivers. I think that's where I'm at. Like if you're at least he's going to give you an opportunity to evaluate your wide receivers. If you have to switch to DTR after that to see what you have in him, I'm all for it. But I don't think you could do both. I don't think you could find out what you have in DTR and evaluate your pass catchers at the same time because you've got too many variables. So that's the way I look at that. But I agree that this offense under Stefanski's ran better when you have someone who can throw on time and make all the reads. 100%. I don't think you get to Zappi to do that. I'm happy to do that with Winston right now. And maybe you see if Winston can be a bridge, but you still have to have your eye on getting your quarterback of the future in here to run that offense. And I've always thought Stefanski should have more overall control than he does, but just the way this franchise is structured, they share in everything. They use the word lockstep a lot, and you're seeing how they carry out their operations. So it's never going to be like Stefanski has ultimate control. It's just not the way it's going to be in Cleveland.
Collaborative. Nobody can be held accountable. Collaborative. All right. Andrew Berry was asked earlier this week when he met with media, have his drafts been good enough?
We're happy with the young players that we have on the roster. We like how they've grown into different roles. A number of them are playing key positions for us. And we'll continue to look to bring young talent onto the team, especially with a full slate of draft picks.
With the cap hits that you face with Deshaun coming up, how much will that limit you from a roster building standpoint, especially if he winds up not being your starting quarterback?
We'll, as I mentioned earlier, Scott, we never look at anything in a single year time frame. We'll be able to build the team.
Casey, I find that interesting. He's got something in mind, clearly, and he's been really good with the cap. Relative to the draft picks, you got to remember they haven't been great. I'm not defending him, but he hasn't had ones. You traded him away because you thought you were getting your franchise quarterback. And if you look, everybody wants to point to John Dorsey. We pulled up John Dorsey's draft where he didn't have a first-round pick. It's not good. It was Greedy Williams in the second, Sione Takitaki, and then a bunch of guys that were special teams players, basically. So now, he didn't have the first-round picks because he traded them away, but his drafting hasn't been great, but it hadn't been as bad as fans want to make it out to be. You can look at every GM, and you're going to point out a number of misses.
That's immediately where my brain goes. His hit rate's just as high as anyone else's. That's what's crazy is you spend all year, you have entire divisions of your organization that are just focused on this one thing, and it still comes down to almost a coin flip at the end of the day. So you could be as prepared for the draft as you want to be, think you understand what that player is going to be able to do in your system, in your scheme, and how they'll be able to grow and develop, and when they'll hit their ceiling. And it's still at the end of the day, it's you're flipping a coin. And for everyone I can name, because he's had some, Siaka, Ika, and Anthony Schwartz, you can name some ones that are just they're hard to look at, but he's also hit. Talk about DeJuan Jones, your starting left tackle right now is a 4th-round pick. Now, we don't know how that's going to end up, but he had a promising rookie year, came out banged up in his second year. Now we're seeing him getting his footing again. And if that pans off, then you got your starting left tackle as a 4th-round pick. That's excellent, but there's a lot of juggling here. But that's what I mean when this is the self-scout week and you start pulling things apart and you see little individual efforts out there by some of these young players on rookie contracts that are very promising. But it's about can they develop and stack year over year. We saw Emerson in his first 2 years. He's had a little bit of a setback in his 3rd year. He's been better as of late. But you need to gather starters that aren't just first-round picks. You can't just rely on your first-round picks to build your team. You have to hit rounds 1 at least through 5. Every now and again, you pull one of those 6 or 7s, and they end up being a contributor. But it's a conglomerate of effort. But they definitely need to reevaluate how they look at certain positions. I'll say that.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, before I let you go, a mock draft this week. 33rd team does it. They have the Patriots. Going number 1, taking edge rusher James Pierce from Tennessee. Jaguars taking Travis Hunter, wide receiver cornerback from Colorado. The Saints get Shedeur Sanders. The Panthers take Cam Ward. And the Browns get Abdul Carter, edge rusher from Penn State. Cleveland gets sniped for the only 2 quarterbacks in the class with first-round grade. Forcing one here doesn't make sense. Instead, best player available makes more sense. Lead athlete, 6'3", 259 Carter is comfortably the second best edge rusher in the class as of today. And again, I've seen him play a little. He looks good in the Big Ten. The one thing I don't want them to do is force a quarterback if one of them that they don't like isn't there.
Yeah, and I suspect one will go at number 1 overall by the time this is all said and done. I'll say this about Penn State players in general. I never know if I love the player or if I just love their strength and conditioning program.
Yep.
All those guys test out of their mind. They're phenomenal athletes. Sometimes they have a hard time producing in the NFL. That's not all the time. Obviously, you have Micah Parsons, and there are things you can point to, but there's also ways you can look at in Baltimore. It's like that guy's not even making game day rosters anymore. So but I also don't think the Browns have a pressing need at edge. When I look at what they have, like between Isaiah McGuire and then Alex Wright, I think they can finally stop renting Myles Garrett's running mate. Like I don't see that being a pressing need in the first round. I think you have other things you could do. But if Abdul Carter ends up being the best player available truly in their minds, I have no issue with them taking him.
Casey Kinnamon, is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Casey.
Anytime, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Casey Kinnamon, make sure you check him out. Orange and Brown Report, also co-host of the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, as well as the Barking Browns podcast. We're going to take a quick time out. Dalton Wasserman from PFF straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s, $10 each. 10 times multipliers, 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Obviously, we don't have our future quarterback. What we need to do is really study the draft, find the guy that we think we can develop. In the meantime, we need to find a way to get either Joe Flacco back if he's willing to come back to our organization. If not him, then try to get Carson Wentz from the Chiefs and have him be your bridge quarterback. And that way we don't have to rush a rookie right into the mix. And then use all these draft picks to rebuild our secondary, which is horrible, and then also help the offensive line some because we do need some depth. I think Nick Chubb is going to be fine. Obviously, this was just 2 games into his comeback, and we can't expect him to be the same guy yet. So give him another 6 weeks, and then next year he'll be back better than ever.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst. Dalton, Nick Chubb's a free agent at the end of the year. I think they need to worry about their offensive line. Quarterback, I don't know if either of those guys would be the bridge quarterback. You need somebody. I guess Flacco's been playing pretty well. Carson Wentz, I haven't seen that. But I get the idea of a bridge quarterback for a year and a developmental guy. You can't force a quarterback. Who are some? You're also you do the college football show on PFF. Who are some of the college quarterbacks that you think maybe not? Assuming Ward and Sanders are off the board because they're not going to finish high enough. Who are some of the ones that you think might fit a developmental guy that could become a really good NFL quarterback?
Lately, one of the risers has been LSU's Garrett Nussmeier, who, he's the son of Doug Nussmeier, who's been a longtime coach. And I think that's really, he kind of fits a pro-style pocket-oriented kind of quarterback, probably a guy who could run Kevin Stefanski's system pretty well. And then I think, and we've seen some shakiness out of him lately. You're still looking at Georgia's Carson Beck, too, in a similar vein, right? He's a pocket guy. He's used to playing under center at Georgia. He can get into a run game kind of oriented offense as long as he's protected. Carson Beck, he's a little bit supporting cast dependent, and the Browns would have to build that around him. But I think those are the next two guys on the list, past Shedeur and Ward, that I feel like, okay, they could come into the league. I think mentally they have a very high football IQ, both of them, and they just need to be surrounded with the right supporting cast. So I think those would be two guys, maybe even in the second round, they could be looking at.
Yeah, that was the next question. You think both those guys go in the second round, or are they a little bit further down even?
I think second round probably sounds about right. I think this quarterback class is definitely thinner than last year's. I think there's only two guys right now. You mentioned Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. Those are the only two guys right now I feel really good about going in the first round. You have some other guys they're different types of players. Nussmeier and Beck are pocket quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe, kind of the ultimate athlete in the Anthony Richardson vein. There's a handful of day three guys that could be intriguing. But I think right now, round two, maybe very late round one, if you trade back in, or round two seems right now like a reasonable spot for Nussmeier or Beck. But there's going to be opinions about this class flying all over the place because there's no shoe-in guy that's I think you're going to see different GMs have different preferences as to who they think is the best one.
Which always leads to, the evaluation. And we haven't got quarterback right in quite a while here. So that's a challenge. Do you think there's any chance that Quinn Ewers declares for the NFL draft, or do you think he's going back to Texas?
No, I could see him declaring. I think a lot of it depends on how the rest of Texas season goes. He's had some inconsistencies also this time, where he's looked great like he did against Michigan earlier in the year. Then he's had a couple of poor games, especially against Georgia. We saw in a big game that they lost. So I think there's more to be determined for Ewers, but I would bet right now on him going into the draft, especially with Arch Manning sitting there behind him and a lot of, everyone around the Longhorns and a lot of their fans, they want Manning to start, maybe some of them even now, but certainly next year. So I think Ewers is going to come out in this draft, and he's probably in that same range. I might put him a half step below Nussmeier and Beck. He's just been very inconsistent throughout his career.
All right, take a look at this, kind of interesting. So NFL defensive rankings entering Week 10. They have the Chargers 1, Vikings 2, Broncos 3. They're the Browns 8. Browns' defensive metrics do not blow you away, but they continue to be a solid unit this season. They've only allowed over 30 points twice and helped opponents to 21 points or fewer on 5 occasions. One area of particular strength has been getting pressure without blitzing. They're first in that, which has resulted in the 4th best sack rate in the league. A lot of people locally have said the Browns' offense is kind of bringing down the defense because it's just been so bad.
Yeah, I would say that's true. Obviously, the offense has really been in shambles for most of the year, but I don't think this defense has been quite what it was last year, especially on the back end in the secondary. Look, for us, we've got their pass rush and their run defense both in the top 4 in the NFL according to our grading, but their coverage has been the second worst. So I think there has been a problem of the guys, especially on the back end out there at corner. Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome, even Denzel Ward has been kind of hit or miss really across the board in the secondary. Too many big plays and too many mental mistakes, right? And I think the front 7 is obviously a part where Browns opponents, that's the first thing they focus on, is how in the world do we block these guys, because they're really good up front. But there's been a lot of mistakes made this year in the secondary. So, yes, the offense has been a problem. We know it's been a problem all season, and it's put their defense kind of in compromising spots. But the secondary hasn't been as good this year, nearly as good this year as it was last year.
The one that's particularly concerning and head-scratching is Emerson. I thought he was on the verge of becoming a Pro Bowl corner, and he has not looked anything at all like he did his first couple of seasons in the league.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a defense that takes a lot of chances with man coverage, and cornerback performance can be volatile when you do that, right? You have a couple of bad days here. You're one-on-one with some of the best receivers in the league. So I think you're really talking about that. And again, I see even when they get in zones, it's been a lot of mental mistakes. And these are mental mistakes that for some reason we didn't see last year. And now we're seeing them this year. You saw a couple of, I mean, you've seen them almost every week. Honestly, you just see explosive plays. I mean, when they played the Chargers, there was a big touchdown to Quentin Johnston that felt like a mistake, and that was from Denzel Ward. It just hasn't been in sync. In zones, there's been a lot of mental mistakes. And then when you play so much man coverage like they do, these are the gambles that you take with the explosive plays downfield.
Dalton Wasserman from PFF and I going to step aside, take a quick time out on the side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We'll also talk some college football. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s, $10 each. 10 times multipliers, 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. Look, I'm tired of seeing GMs and coaches getting fired, so then they have to start all over again. So I'm really trying to put myself in Haslam's shoes to truly make an educated decision. Even the greatest coaches had losing seasons. I'm not saying Stefanski will be one of the all-time greats, but I just don't know if I will fire him. The problem is that we Browns fans, all we know is losing the last 20-something odd years. So it's tough for us to be clear-minded when thinking if Haslam should fire Stefanski. This whole season was just an utter disaster. And in the NFL, if you find your quarterback, you can turn it around from one year to the next. Just look at history. It's happened every single season. Thanks.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Dalton, I have seen so many coaching changes here. I don't think and I go back and forth on this, so I'll admit I'm waffling. I don't think I would fire either the coach or the GM at this point. Now, they got extended, and when they got extended, I said their job was to go from mediocre, which, you know, playoff team this year, to consistent playoff team. It's been a disaster in year one, but I would give them another chance. And you know, back-to-back disasters, and you're probably gone in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, organizationally, really, it's the big thing where trading for Deshaun Watson ended up being the big mistake, right? And I don't think we can. I don't know what Kevin Stefanski is supposed to do with the team he has on the field right now, right? Sometimes a coach just can't overcome the shortage of talent he has, especially on offense, in an offense like this, where now we're this far in the season. You've got Jameis Winston starting. They traded his number one receiver. You already had Nick Chubb coming off of the injury. It really wasn't set up very well for him to succeed. It's amazing that he succeeded last year, starting 4 different quarterbacks and taking Joe Flacco and the guys to the playoffs. So no, I don't think Stefanski is at fault here at all. I think he would be well deserved of keeping the job and trying to find a way to build this thing, whether it's building the rest of the team in this upcoming draft and getting a quarterback the year after, or finding a more veteran option, or if they feel like, you know, one of those top guys in this year's class is their guy for sure, and they feel like that's the way to move forward. I think Stefanski deserves a shot to do that because, you know, I think there's been other factors here, obviously, about going and getting Deshaun Watson and then continuing to start him because of the contract and all of that stuff. So I really don't know, you know, as we look at this Brown season kind of from a bird's eye view, what Stefanski was supposed to do to be any better than this as a team.
All right, when you look at the Browns trade deadline, you know, they traded Zadarius Smith, 5th and a 6th. They gave up a 7th. They cut Quentin Jefferson. Were you surprised that they didn't do more? And what does the fact that those were the only 2 moves tell you the organization is thinking?
Well, I think it tells you they're a little bit stuck. And what you have with Zadarius Smith, he was the one tradable guy, a veteran guy there that really his contract it was easy to get rid of after this season, right? He can be cut next year at no expense. And you have a lot of veteran guys on the Browns who still have multiple years left this year and next year and maybe even beyond that. It's hard to trade guys, especially in football with the way the cap works, that have multiple years left on their deals, right? And you'd be getting, even if you found a way to do it, you'd be getting almost nothing for them. Say somebody like Joel Bitonio, right, who I believe has this year and next year still mostly guaranteed on his contract. It's tougher to trade that guy. It's tougher for another team to pick up an expensive guy like that when it's rolling into next year too. So I'm not really surprised that they didn't trade a whole lot of guys. Zadarius, and especially going to the Lions, was the obvious trade that everyone had been prodding at for 2 or 3 weeks now. But I think it just shows you kind of they're a little bit stuck in their cap situation. They have a very veteran team, one of the older rosters in football, and obviously the quarterback situation. So it's going to take some time really to overhaul this thing.
All right, let's take a look. College football playoffs released their first 12-team rankings. Oregon was 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Miami 4. But the first-round byes go to the conference championship teams that they're projecting. So right now you got Oregon, Georgia, Miami, and Brigham Young as the byes. And you have, Ohio State would play Boise State. And Ohio State would be the 5th seed. What stood out? What did you notice? What did you anything surprise you with the first rankings that were released?
No, I think honestly those 12 teams for the moment are the right 12. I think the only thing I would do is, for me, if you push out those overall rankings that they had, like BYU's in that 4th spot because they're projected as the Big 12 champion, but they're sitting at number 9 right now. The only thing I would do is probably switch them and Penn State at 6, right? Because there's an argument, say, for a team like Indiana where they've played a soft schedule, and I understand that they've dominated a soft schedule, but that's not the case for BYU. I think the Big 12 is getting a little underrated here. They have a big win at SMU. They got a near 30-point win over Kansas State, who's still ranked, I believe, number 18 or 19. So I think BYU is the one team is a little bit low, and I would switch them with Penn State. I would have BYU at 6 and Penn State at 9, but otherwise I think they got the right 12 teams, and I think for the most part the rankings are solid.
Are you surprised at the way the Big Ten is hit? Normally it's the SEC, and this year – the SEC has kind of cannibalized each other a little bit. The Big Ten looks really strong.
Yeah, it does. Those top 4 are really good. They're all really good. Oregon has a very inside track to that number 1 seed. Ohio State, just like it's ranked there, they could be the highest ranked team that doesn't win a conference title, or Oregon will be in that 5 spot if Ohio State can find a way to win the conference. And then you got Penn State, who I think they might be the biggest question to me. They still have a couple of decent games to get through, but we saw they played against Ohio State. We've seen them get off to a lot of slow starts in their games, but I think Penn State and Indiana, Penn State, if they take care of business and get to 11-1, I think they're still getting in. And Indiana, the same thing. If they get to at least 11-1, I believe they're getting in with as much as they've dominated everybody on their schedule so far. I'm very curious to see how they play this weekend against a Michigan team that, look, hasn't gone great for them, but they still have a lot of pride and a really good defense.
Yeah, they're like, I saw that they're like 2 touchdown favorites being Indiana, and I was like, whoa. And again, as you said, though, they're running it up on everybody they play.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, this Indiana team, don't be fooled by any strength of schedule metric or anything like that. They have wiped the floor with everybody in front of them. They are really explosive offensively. They've got a very good defense, especially in their front 7. Kurt Cignetti's got, I do think they're one of the best teams in college football. I think eventually we will probably see them as one of the 12 best teams. These next 2 weeks are going to tell us a lot, though. Michigan is still a tough opponent with a really good defensive line that could give them problems. And then you have the big one in 2 weeks after a bye week at Ohio State, which if we see them dominate Michigan this week, I think it's a very realistic chance that they could go into Ohio State and win. That's how good I think Indiana is. I don't think this is a mirage.
All right. What games you paying attention to this week before I let you go?
So on top of the Indiana game, the 2 big SEC games this week, I think first you've got Alabama going down to LSU. I think the loser of that game is going to be out. I don't think there's enough left in the rest of their schedule to make up for having 3 losses. So I think you're talking about a de facto playoff game taking place Saturday night at Death Valley. And the other one, Georgia and Ole Miss. And I think the big story here is that Ole Miss is really on their last legs. similar to those first two teams I just mentioned. If they get a third loss, I don't think they have enough big wins on their schedule to get into the playoff at 9-3. Ole Miss is fighting for their life, and Bama and LSU are fighting each other for it, essentially as an elimination game.
What have you thought about Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin?
Oh, it's tough. This is going to be the week of all weeks, because right now their character is they're really good, but they don't win the big games, right? And this week at home against Georgia, they're still an underdog, of course, a 3 or 4 point dog against Georgia, but they've gotten hot the last couple weeks. From what I've seen the last 2 weeks, I do think they have a chance to win, it's a lot better than what we saw the 3 weeks before that when they lost 2 out of 3. So I'm very in between on Ole Miss. It's one of these moments, just like it was last year. You have to beat one of these elite teams. You can't get by only beating softer teams in the bottom half of the SEC and dominating them and putting up stats. This is a game, I think it's one of the biggest games. It's probably the biggest game of Lane Kiffin's tenure so far, because it's the one team that he has to prove he can find a way to beat instead of just, losing in the trenches and getting dominated like they did last year.
Dalton Wasserman, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Dalton.
Appreciate it, as always, Dave. Thank you.
Dalton Wasserman, check him out. He's a PFF analyst, and he co-hosts PFF's College Football Show. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.